Presentation of dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore and Bettis family legacy of building the great state of Idaho, by the Friends of Idaho Public Television, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, with additional funding from the James and Barbara Semino Foundation.
We had to rush it essentially because of the war. We moved it up through their printer because it was just, there was suddenly a demand for the book.
What happens when the fictional story you've written intersects with current events? That's what occurred to my guest today, whose very first novel, I Will Die in a Foreign Land, is about Ukraine. I talk with author Kalani Pickhart next. It's all part of a 15th anniversary edition of Conversations from the Sun Valley Writers Conference on Dialogue. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Marcia Franklin. When Kalani Pickhart was getting her master's degree in creative writing, her original thesis project was a novel about a baseball player. But then she watched a documentary called Winter on Fire. The Academy Award-nominated film chronicles the Maidan uprising in Ukraine during 2013 and 2014. Its stories and themes so touched Pickhart that she decided to change the focus of her book and create characters who meet each other during the uprising. After years of research and writing, including visiting Ukraine, her book, I Will Die in a Foreign Land, was published in late 2021. Just a few months later, Russia invaded Ukraine. All of a sudden, there was increased demand for the book as people tried to learn more about Ukrainian history. It's been a wild ride for Pickhart, who's a first-time author. I talk with her about the experience at the 2022 Sun Valley Writers Conference. Well, welcome to you. It's so nice to meet you, and I understand you have an Idaho connection.
Yes, yeah, I was born here. I was born in Mountain Home Air Force Base, yeah.
Right. Well, it's a coming home then,
yeah.
Back to Idaho.
Totally is, yeah.
Have to stay a little bit longer, and right now you're in Arizona, right?
Yeah, I'm in Arizona,
okay.
Phoenix.
Tell me what the last, 9 months or so has been like. You published your book, I wrote down, October 19th, 2021, is that correct?
Yeah.
And then it's set in Ukraine, and Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th, 2022. Yes. So not that long after your book that you've spent time on, invested in the characters. Yeah. What has this been like for you the last bit here?
So, when the book was released, it was obviously very exciting. This has been a wild experience for me. This is, my first book. I was an unagented writer, and the publisher, picked me up, and it was sort of a ride from there. But yeah, having released the book in October, and then not long after that, seeing the news and that Putin did a full force attack on Ukraine was very jarring for us. I just feel really close to the material, and even though I'm not Ukrainian, it's been years of work on this book and talking to Ukrainians and researching their culture. I've been surprised and grateful, though, that people who aren't familiar with Ukraine have been reaching for my book to try and understand what's happening. I think that that's really moving to me. A lot of feedback that I've gotten is that folks were really wanting to learn about the war, but not, looking at a textbook was maybe just too daunting or a piece of nonfiction. And so I feel very honored that my novel's been able to not only resonate with Ukrainian readers, but also, resonate with folks who haven't had any experience with this culture. You can see the photos and the horrible stories that are happening now in the news. But this access into fiction allows people, I think, to connect to through a character's eyes. And so that's the positive, I think, from this experience is people are caring more.
And you are donating some proceeds to the Ukrainian Red Cross, yes?
Yeah. So part of my author proceeds are going to the Ukrainian Red Cross.
Well, the other thing that makes the connection even stronger is because your novel is about people who were involved in the Maidan uprising, 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
The characters themselves almost, when you read it, you think, well, might they be involved now?
Absolutely, yeah. I think about that often. I don't think that there's a doubt in my mind that the characters would return, so.
Folks can read more about the Maidan uprising, but in a nutshell, because this is the setting for your book, in a nutshell, it happened again at the end of, it was about 3 months long, right? The end of 2013 into 2014, because it looked as if Ukraine was going to move towards being part of the European Union, and the then president, who was backed by Putin, pulled out of that, and people were so upset that they started massing in Kiev and across the country. And that became an encampment. And there is a documentary about this, Winter on Fire, that was nominated for an Academy Award. And that really was your way into the story, wasn't it, as a grad student, as an MFA student, looking for something to write about? I mean, at first, as I understand it, was you were going to write about baseball.
Yes, I was.
And then you saw this documentary, and it really reached you. Talk about that.
Yeah. When I watched the documentary, though, it wasn't the political feedback that I was that I was drawn to. It was the actual people that were out in the street, and people who had at once served in the military are now training people how to protect themselves from the military police force that was in Kiev. And I just found it really moving that as a citizen, sometimes you feel so powerless, I think, in when you see politics happening in Washington, and all you can do is vote. And watching that documentary really changed the game in my mind, and to see the tenacity of the Ukrainian people to show up day in and day out, and despite the violence, they really weren't, they were afraid, but they were brave, and that really resonated with me. I'd never seen anything like that before. And so while I was in my MFA program, you have 3 dedicated years to just writing. And I thought to myself, this is going to be a very ambitious book. And the deeper I got into it and understood how the history of Ukraine and Russia played into each other up to that moment, it became a much more complex book. And I thought, I have these 3 years, I'm just going to go for it. And it's either going to be a terrible disaster, or it's going to end up being something beautiful. And so, that's how it ended up coming to be.
And I've watched the documentary as well, and there's a particular scene in it, I think, that really touched your heart, and it is really interesting, where the bells of St. Michael's Church, it's the urgency was so great to let people know that something was happening in Independence Square, that help was needed and more people were needed, that the monks, right, rang those bells. All bells rang on that church for the first time in something like 800-900 years.
Yeah, it was the last time that they rang the bells all at the same time. It was 1240 when the Mongols invaded. And so that was really captivating to me too, because now they're ringing the bells against their own government, which was just, to perceive your own government as an invader of sorts, or attacking the people was very moving to me. And I think I also just have like a affinity for churches and just like the refuge that they provide. And that church later on became like a makeshift hospital. So it was very clear that was going to be like the center of the book.
Now, you did eventually get to visit Ukraine in 2018, if
Yes.
I'm correct.
Yeah.
But you had these years where you were writing this, not ever having been there.
Yeah.
How do you construct a novel, and we'll talk about the characters in a moment, without ever having been to the place that it's set? Google and
Yeah,
pictures.
Yeah, I think that because Maidan happened so recently to when I was writing the book, it wasn't that far in the past, and there was just an abundance of news articles and media, lots of interviews, footage of the actual events. A number of documentaries came out. So I was just taking everything in through osmosis, and really focusing a lot of my work on Euromaidan.
And we should say that's another way of saying Maidan, Euromaidan, because it was about joining the European Union. It's the same thing.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah. And I spent a lot of my time focusing up until 2018 on Euromaidan and the scenes and everything that happens with the characters there. And once I went to Ukraine, it was like a whole different reality, because you're actually in the city, you're around the people, you're hearing the language, it made the book even more real for me. So, and then after that, I went to Prague, which was another aspect of the book that also became very real. So,
well, let's talk about the novel itself. You have four plus characters, five, and they all. The hinge point is this Euromaidan protest. They're very different. One is born in Ukraine but was adopted, lived in America, and has come back after a tragedy. One is a former mine worker, grew up in Chernobyl. His wife has died, probably from exposure to Chernobyl. Alexander, another character, is a Russian who had served in the KGB and now has had regrets.
Yeah.
And Slava, who's a Ukrainian woman who had an extremely difficult life, and Dasha, a reporter, who is also had a difficult life, is trying to cover both sides of the story.
Yeah.
So these characters all eventually intertwine and meet, and it all comes to a conclusion. Was it hard to, first of all, you had to decide what characters you wanted and the reasons for them, and then have that braiding happen?
Yeah. The first voice that I heard was Alexander's, oddly enough, who's not Ukrainian. And in some ways that doesn't surprise me because I'm not Ukrainian. So he's an outsider. And even though Katya is Ukrainian heritage, she didn't grow up there. So those were the two characters that I heard first. And those were the two characters that I worked through first. And then once I started to think about their storyline, their trajectory. One thing that I knew I wanted in the book, or that I felt that the book was about, was a love story. And that's where Misha came into Katya's life.
Who's the former mine worker.
Former mine worker. And Slava, I had seen a documentary on the group Femin, and they were a very avant-garde protest group, and I thought that having a very strong Ukrainian young woman in there would be, would really resonate with readers. And so anyways, the initial drafts of this book, it wasn't really interwoven. I wrote each narrative out one by one. Dasha came into the picture much later once I was figuring out who Slava was. Yeah, Dasha's a reporter. And so that's kind of how it materialized. And then I do enjoy myself reading novels that switch perspective and see different sides of an experience. And so I thought, especially with all the research that I've been doing about Ukraine, that it's a very complex region of the world. And I really wanted my goal and my understanding is that a lot of American readers weren't going to know the complexities of Ukraine and why this protest movement was important. And so a lot of it was educational in the sense that through each of these perspectives, you could learn something new about Ukraine.
And what I thought was really interesting was the Dasha character, the reporter. She is trying to, she doesn't see it as just black and white, but she sees the shades of gray.
Yeah.
And that is the case. I mean, there are Ukrainians who affiliate more with Russia.
Yeah.
Particularly over in that eastern part that Russia is saying it's theirs, because it was at one point part of the Russian Empire, and people speak Russian. And you have that in your book. She's trying to parse that.
Yeah.
And then you have a minor character though, has gone to fight for the Republic, the breakaway area.
Yeah.
So was that important to you to get that, for want of a better word, gray in there?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I definitely came into this from that perspective of the documentary, The Winter on Fire, where it was very much like Ukraine's fight for independence, you know. And but the more that I learned that, you know, there were other generations of Ukrainians who lived during the USSR, and you know, would say like, this is actually better for us, you know. It became important to me because I feel like, you know, at the same time, our political landscape was changing in the United States, and Dasha was a very integral character into how important reliable news sources are, unbiased reporting, and being able to see both sides so that people can understand and have more compassion towards one another. So she was a very integral piece of the book. And for me personally, I mean, writing about the murky history of Ukraine with, you know, there's a very interesting and terrible past with Ukraine and the Polish and the Jewish people. And so it was showing all of that, like all of the messiness involved.
I would like to ask you about the Chopsari singers,
Yeah.
which is folk singers, and you've used them as a chorus, really, as a almost omniscient narrator throughout.
Yeah.
Why was that important to you to have that?
Yeah. Ukrainians are a very musical group of people. They're often singing, and at Maidan, they were singing in the streets. And when they were carrying the bodies of the Heavenly Hundred to their resting place, they were singing Ukrainian lament, which
the 100 people, civilians who died during
Yes. They were singing Ukrainian lament, which is where the title of the book comes from. And so that voice, that singing, you know, it came through. It would pop up multiple times in the book, you know, through the scenes at Euromaidan. But there was also this sort of omniscient voice that kind of came in every time, you know, every once in a while I was writing. And it was telling the story of Ukraine. And it came out much later in my revision, but it felt very, very important. And it ultimately ended up being one of my favorite parts of writing the book. And for many readers, the feedback that I've gotten is that they've also really enjoyed that part, which is really nice to hear too. It was a risk to put in a little bit of like a poetry, you know, poetry lean in there. But it's been very well received, and I'm so glad.
It sounds as if the characters really did move through you. Some authors I've interviewed say that, some don't.
Yeah.
But it sounds like in this case, you were hearing these characters and they were really alive inside of you.
Yeah, it was a very, I think there's parts of the book that I read that I don't know how they got in there. You know, it's just it's just that artistic flow, that there's something that like speaks through you and it feels like otherworldly and very powerful. And I think that when that voice comes, it's incredibly important to listen. Because sometimes it doesn't come very often.
What would you say binds your characters together in addition to their interest in the protests?
I'd say love, actually. My favorite books are always those that uncover love and compassion and tenderness in times of crisis and fear. And I think that that's the most beautiful part of human nature, is you can see all these terrible things happening around you, but then there's these beautiful moments of tenderness and love. And for each of the characters in the book, it's this genuine like caring for one another, falling in love with one another, and trying to understand each other. And so that was a motivating factor for me as a writer, to be excited to know about these characters intimately and for them to be honest. And with that honesty came love too.
And there's a little mystery in there for
There
readers.
is a little mystery, yeah. Yeah, that was probably the most fun I had writing the book, was writing the mystery and a lot of Alexander's experiences in the KGB.
You mentioned earlier that you're an unaged writer.
Yeah.
And, you'd send out queries and things like that.
Yeah.
It's charming, actually, in reading about it, but $2 Radio took a chance, I guess.
Yeah.
We could say, on you.
Yeah. It was an incredible, I mean, I sent the book out to at least 50 agents, doing hours of research, trying to find out who might be interested in this. I think I only got one full manuscript request, which was later turned down. But $2 Radio, I mean, they publish a lot of Eastern European writers, and Eric, one half of $2 Radio, his family's from Croatia. So I think that there's a natural draw there. And I was just thrilled. I mean, I was thrilled that they wanted to take the time with it, because it's such a hard book. It's a difficult book to summarize on a book jacket. It's, and they did the work day in and day out for it. And I was just I'm very impressed by them. And now I do have an agent, so that's exciting too. So, I have this really great support system that came forward with this book. And it's just been an incredible, surreal experience. And yeah.
Did I read that at one point you papered a wall with all the rejection, or you had all the rejection slips in front of you?
I totally did, yeah. It was also motivating for me, because I was getting close to quitting and sending it out and just taking a break and thinking, okay, I'm just gonna work on something else, and I'll try sending this out again or looking at it another year. And that didn't happen. So it was within a month of my decision. It was around the holidays. Eric sent me an email on Christmas Day asking, are the rights still available for this? And it was just amazing, so. And
now, has there been a real surge of interest, and they're having to print quite a few more books?
Oh, yes. That's, I try to keep track of what they've been up to, but we sold out of the hardcover editions, and I believe there are 5,000 of those. And then they have done a run of, I believe, 10,000 for the paperback copy. So we had to rush it essentially because of the war. We moved it up through their printer because it was just, there was suddenly a demand for the book. And so we moved it up 6 months to be able to print it, which was incredible.
So you have a good response from Ukrainians as well?
Yeah, that's been the most meaningful for me, is to know that the book is very complex in Ukrainian history, and to still have Ukrainians read it and say, this book is beautiful and thank you so much for it.
Do you envision that it could be put to screen?
Yeah, we've had some interest in that, actually. And I can see it in my mind as a movie, or more of like a series, because you'd have to take in so many different perspectives and things that happen in the book. But I would love to see that.
Yeah, because you could actually expand the characters more.
Yeah. I would love to see something that's just so close to you. There's a part of me that's just like, ooh, you don't want to let it go. But I actually think it would be really exciting to see somebody's interpretation of the book, in film, and I think that'd be really exciting.
Kalani, will you go back to Ukraine?
I really hope so. Yeah, I really hope so. I do hope very, very soon that I can return to Ukraine and it'll look a lot different than it was when I was there. But it'll still be beautiful, and I'm very excited for the number of people who've learned about how incredible Ukraine is and the history there, and the folks that I'm seeing out on social media saying, like, I'm ready to visit this city, when it's safe. And so hoping for an end to the war very soon.
And what have you learned about yourself writing this? It sounds like it's been quite a journey.
Wow, that I can do it. I never thought I could write something like this. First of all, it was so scoping and intimidating. And these are the books I'd like to read. These are not the books I think about writing. But I did it. And everything else that came afterward was because I spent so much time with the work and doing the research and feeling for these people, these characters in the book. This is just the win that I needed. And I'm very grateful that it ended up printed. And I'm even more grateful for the fact that I have readers and people that are excited to talk to me about this book. So it really means the world to me. And I want to keep going, and I'm really excited to think about what is next. Right now, I'm kind of through this osmosis phase where I think I'm going to go in this direction, but then something else really shiny is over here. And so I'm kind of in this phase of just absorbing as much material as possible and kind of seeing where the chips may fall. And a lot of that is hopefully falling in the bayou, so which is a completely different environment than Ukraine. So,
well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I look forward to seeing what comes next.
Yeah, thank you so much. This means so much.
Of course. You've been listening to author Kalani Pickhart talking about her book, I Will Die in a Foreign Land. Our conversation was taped at the 2022 Sun Valley Writers Conference. My thanks to conference organizers for inviting us back for our 15th year, and to the Dialogue team. If you'd like to watch any of the 70 programs we've taped at the event, head over to our website at idahoptv.org/dialogue. The shows are also on the Idaho Public Television YouTube channel. And don't forget to like the Dialogue Facebook page. For Dialogue, I'm Marcia Franklin. Thanks for joining us.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore and Bettis family legacy of building the great state of Idaho, by the Friends of Idaho Public Television, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, with additional funding from the James and Barbara Semino Foundation.